Hi, everybody, and welcome to the AgNext Podcast, where we're always excited to tell you about what's next from AgNext. I'm Jen Reeskamp. Most folks call me JR. I'm the head of strategy here at AgNext, and I'm here with my co-host.
Hi, I'm Pedro Carvalho. I'm an assistant professor here at CSU and AgNext team. Happy 2024, JR.
Happy New Year. It's very exciting. So on today's episode of the podcast, we have Dr. Greg Thoma, who is AgNext's Director of Agricultural Modeling and Lifecycle Assessment. We're excited to talk to Greg today about what he's been up to since coming to AgNext in the last couple of years, and also learn about his career.
Thanks, JR and Pedro. Great to be here, and Happy New Year to you as well.
Great.
Awesome.
So, Greg, we always start asking our guests to talk about their background, where they're from, growing up, and then diving through your professional career. Like, where did you go to school? Why did you decide to go the pathway that you took, and how it led to come here and be at CSU today?
Wow. Okay, well, Pedro, that's a great question. I'll try to give a quick overview of my life and career and how I got here. Mm-hmm. I was born in 1958 and moved a little bit around, ended up in Arkansas about 1965 in second grade. And my dad was on the faculty in the chemistry department, and I went to high school and then went to college at the University of Arkansas there in Fayetteville. I studied chemical engineering, which was when I started school, I was an undecided major. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the first semester, I went over to the College of Engineering because I decided I didn't want to follow exactly in my father's footsteps as a chemist. And I was filling out the forms, and at the bottom it said, "What's your major?" And I said to the secretary at the dean's office, "Well, I don't really know that much about engineering. Can I just be undecided for a semester?" And she pulled her glasses down and looked at me and said, "The dean would really like you to make a choice." So I checked chemical engineering.
Okay.
And that is the sum total of my
decision,
the thought process. In any case, it turned out to be a good choice. After my undergraduate degree, I joined the Peace Corps. I spent 2 years in Malaysia teaching high school chemistry and biology. That was a really transformative experience and leads directly to an answer to your question of how I got into sort of my career path. Mm-hmm. So in the Peace Corps, you learn a lot of things about yourself and about your culture and other cultures. And one of the things that I became very interested in was quantum physics. So I was reading a bunch of books about quantum physics, and I thought,
just casually in your free time. Yeah, that's good.
I really like this stuff. It's like awesome. Really fascinating. It kind of fits in with some of the Eastern religion ideas and thoughts.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
And so I thought, well, I could either be a Buddhist monk or a quantum physicist, and I'm pretty sure that I can't be a quantum physicist because I don't think I have quite the brain power for that. And then I thought, well, okay, I could be a Buddhist monk, or I could go to graduate school and, do things for, like, in the medical field, to help people or environmental. And I thought, all right, well, I'm going to be an environmental chemical engineer. So that was sort of how I transitioned from, crazy land, if you will, into this broad field. And so I came back to the University of Arkansas for my master's degree, and I worked with a now passed away, but then very, very well-known chemical engineer who was studying environmental problems. He was one of the leaders in the field. And so I studied with him, and then I subsequently spent 8 months in Japan as an intern, not as an intern, as a cultural exchange student. Came back to LSU where my master's advisor had moved, and I did my PhD at LSU in environmental chemical engineering. I got a job then at the University of Arkansas and did what we call fate and transport modeling. So I was in the oil and gas sector for the first probably 10 or 12 years of my academic career. But I'd always had an interest in agriculture, and my grandfather owned a farm. The family still owns a farm in southwest Missouri for cattle and grain production. And when I was in high school, we had 2 dairy cows, so I milked 2 cows twice a day.
That's awesome. So is that just for your family's consumption, the 2 dairy cows?
Yes, we drank a gallon of milk each meal.
Wow.
And
Did you milk
interestingly,
by hand, or did you have a machine?
Oh, by hand.
Okay, I wanted to clarify. This is hard work. I want to get the whole picture.
There you go. In fact, my younger brother had a rock climbing accident and shattered his heel and shattered his either tibia or femur. I can't remember for sure.
Wow, significant injury though. Either way,
significant injury. And the physician, the orthopedist, right, who did the surgery, when he was drilling the holes to put the plates in, he said, "Those are the hardest bones I have ever encountered."
Listen, milk does a body good, they say, right?
Indeed.
So you're milking cows when you lived at home.
Yeah, then that was actually before my undergraduate degree.
Okay, I was trying to go back on the timeline here where we at.
So then I made it to the University of Arkansas, worked in the oil and gas sector for probably 10 or 12 years, and one day a colleague said, "Hey, I'm doing a life cycle assessment on cotton. Would you like to help?" And I said, "Absolutely." And about a year after that, we got a large contract with Dairy Management Incorporated and did one of the first large-scale life cycle assessments in U.S. ag sector.
Wow.
In 2000, started in 2008, and we thought we could do an LCA in about a year. It took us 2.5.
Oh wow!
It turns out there are lots of details
Yes.
in an LCA. So then we did sorry, Pedro.
No, I was going to go back a little bit just because I'm curious, and before we dive through LCA and everything, it's probably on your decision to come back to grad school. Do you think, like, were you exposed to research as an undergrad, or you knew about grad school, you knew that you want to become a professor, or was that inspired by your dad being a faculty? And you've mentioned this,
it
but
beat out the Buddhist monks, so it's got to be significant. We want to know, Greg.
Yeah, I'm always curious, because there are a lot of students who listen to us, and how was, you mentioned the decision to go back to grad school, but were you involved in research as an undergrad, or
that's a good question.
You were familiar with the grad school process and becoming a professor? Were you familiar with that, or how you got exposed to that? Because your family background or anything else?
That's a good question. So most engineering graduates go into industry. I had during my undergraduate career, I had a summer internship with a company in Arkansas, and I realized that wasn't for me. I don't recall precisely the reasons, now, but I remember knowing quite clearly that I didn't want to pursue an industry career. And so it was sort of the combination of being really tired of school and not wanting to follow a traditional engineer's path into industry that led me to the Peace Corps. So coming back from the Peace Corps, of course, I had to make a decision about what am I going to do next, and I wasn't as burned out of school, and so it seemed like a fairly easy path to take to go and get a master's degree. Plus, I knew I was really interested in the environmental side of it, and one of the leading environmental chemical engineering faculty was at Arkansas at the time. And I'd taken his class as an undergraduate, and so I got into his program and did my master's. But to your specific question of did I do research as an undergraduate? Yes, but it wasn't sort of in my field. My dad took a sabbatical to UCLA, and I went out for the summer and I did work in his lab, and so I had my first scientific publication in 1978.
That's cool. Wow! Amazing.
I was a co-author of a radiochromium study to test for cell lysing. Right, that means a lot.
Literally, I have no idea what that means, but it sounds important. It sounds so important.
It does sound important. Anyway, so yeah, first publication as an undergraduate. I'm pretty sure I wasn't the first author, but I did a bunch of the lab work.
Well, and I think, Greg, there's something cool here that I just want to tease out really quick for if we have any students that are listening, is that, you know, you've made a couple of decisions in your life based on your internships, and potentially, or there've been things that have come out of your internships that have really driven your career path. And so I think it's important for any students that are listening that if you do an internship and you don't like it, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's okay if you discover what you don't like. You can still be successful moving forward, and you can take those bits and pieces. But yeah, just wanted to pull that out. I thought that was really cool.
I think one of the sort of a corollary to that is we learn so much more from our failures than our successes.
Oh, sure. Right? Yeah.
So,
yeah. Same idea.
Same idea. So.
And then deciding to go after, then I am assuming you went to a PhD knowing that you want to go back to academia, or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
And how did I get there? That's a good question. So after my master's degree, I took a job as with a civil engineering consulting firm.
Okay.
And it was interesting. I learned some things that I didn't know, right? Because civil engineering is a little bit different. And after about 2 years at that, I realized that it was, again, not for me. And it just didn't seem challenging, right? You know, the problems were, and it may have, you know, there's a whole host of reasons that could have been, but at that time, and for me, it didn't seem challenging. And we thought, my wife and I then, yeah, you know, my dad was a faculty member. It looked like a pretty decent life. And plus I'll get to take summers off and ride my bike all summer.
Well, there you go.
And as it turns out, faculty don't take the summers off.
It's a funny misconception, isn't it?
It is a funny misconception. Great. And so, in any case, so decided to go back to get my doctorate at LSU, also in chemical engineering, and working with the same major professor that I had from my master's, who he had in the interim moved to LSU. That's cool. And I did work on contaminated sediments and, you know, the managing of contaminated sediments, and that led then to my first faculty
Is that
position.
Like dumping sites, or help me understand what that means when you say sediments?
That's a great question.
Contaminated sediments, is that what you said?
Yes, contaminated sediments. So before the Clean Water Act in 1960-something or another, among others, the Hudson River caught on fire.
Yes.
And why did the Hudson River catch on fire? Because water is, as we know, not flammable.
Yeah, these are the questions that we would ask in response to that.
So it was polluted.
Oh, I see.
Right? And the reason that it was polluted is because I'll bring in a story from my Malaysia days here to tie this together. So when I was in Malaysia, I was astounded at how many plastic bags were just dumped on the side of the road. I couldn't figure out why there was so much litter in Malaysia. And this was in 1982 and 3. And then I'd go to the little shop across the street, get breakfast, and it was a rice and a spicy fish dish wrapped in a banana leaf with a little wooden skewer. And of course, if your packaging is banana leaves and you throw it out into the ditch, right? No problem. So we have this misconception that the earth can manage all of the waste that we dump onto it. And so pre-1967, before, these regulations were put in place, industries didn't know any better, right? They weren't intentionally being bad. They're just,
like, this is what we know.
You discharge this stuff into the river, and the river takes it away, and everything's fine. Well, we discovered then, of course, that was not really
didn't quite make it all the way through.
Not a good idea. And so what happens then is the Clean Water Act comes, and the discharges stop almost immediately. But during all of that time, lots of hydrophobic chemicals had been, dumped into the streams, and they stick to the sediment and they sink. And so the water becomes clean really quickly, right? Because you got fresh water coming through all the time, and you're not discharging any longer. And so the sediment, having accumulated
just like years and years of stuff,
becomes now a source of contamination, right? A continuing source of contamination. So my doctoral research was trying to figure out, how do you manage this, new and sort of unexpected source of contamination?
Yep.
And so I did mathematical modeling and physical modeling in the laboratory, and one of the solutions that we looked at was just what we call capping it in place. So putting a sand layer on top of it to slow the diffusion and basically help keep them contained. The other thing you could think about doing was going in and dredging it up, right? But that makes a huge cloud of, contaminated sediment.
Sure. So, Greg, I'm curious to know too, so was this kind of your first dipping your toe into life cycle assessment in your PhD? And can you tell us, it wasn't.
No,
okay.
No.
Okay. So you've been doing it up until that point.
No, I didn't even know how to spell LCA.
Oh, you didn't. Okay. You hadn't done it.
No.
Okay. Cause I was thinking about just the system of the inputs and the outputs, so I guess that's sort of the next question that I have for you about, what interests you about sustainability and animal agriculture, but I jumped a little quickly to the LCA question. So I'm kind of curious though, because I feel like I feel like we're on the journey that way. So
So the thing is, when you have had as long a time to do things as I have, it's a twisty path. My family has a saying that we say life is a zigzag path.
No.
So let's see. So my doctoral work, right? Finished that up. Took a job at Arkansas. Continued that same vein of study, right? Yeah. And expanded a little bit into the oil and gas sector. Did some work with restoration of contaminated land in the tallgrass prairie in eastern Oklahoma. A number of field studies and lab studies, and then in around 2007, which is when my colleague Marty Matlock had this cotton life cycle assessment.
Oh yes,
right?
That makes sense. Okay.
And so I had a cohort of graduate students, like 7, that all graduated within a year, and so I was pretty much without graduate students, and I was at a point where I could sort of pivot my career, and so I pivoted away from the oil and gas sector to agriculture. And as I had said, I had
because of the connection,
cows and grandpa, and
yes,
right. So and it just made and Marty was a bio and ag engineer, right? So he had a focus on agriculture. Of course, LCA can be used in any sector. It's not just in ag.
It's not specific to ag, yeah.
But because we had these opportunities, right, with the cotton project first, and then with the dairy project that led into quite a number of other projects over the last 15 years. And so then probably one of your next questions is, how did I get to AgNext?
Yes, that is. Do you want to ask, Pedro?
No, but I'm curious, and then you started with LCAs and you did several LCAs. Can you just briefly explain what is an LCA? It's probably complex, but just...
No.
He says no like it's not, but it really is.
Sometimes it's embarrassingly simple to talk about LCAs because... So I'll back up. When I started my chemical engineering, right, so after I had the conversation with the dean's secretary. Right? So
Just check the box. This is what I'm doing with my life now.
That's right. So I go to my very first chemical engineering class, and the professor was named Chuck Thatcher. And even then, he was kind of abrasive, but nice. And the first thing he wrote on the chalkboard for the class, up in the upper left-hand corner, he wrote in equals out. Okay. And he said, if you can understand this equation, you can be a chemical engineer. And to your point, it's not simple.
It's not quite that easy.
And so life cycle assessment is basically, right, keeping track of material and energy flows, which is the foundation, right, to the point of in equals out. It's the foundation of the science of chemical engineering is mass and energy balances. And life cycle assessment is mass and energy balances at scale, right? So instead of doing a mass and energy balance on a reactor, we're doing a mass and energy balance on the economy. Right?
Okay.
And so that's where the complexity comes in, is because we're not talking about simple systems, right? Even a dairy farm or a beef farm.
Yeah, I was just going to say, could you walk us through maybe like a beef LCA or a dairy LCA so folks could kind of maybe understand the inputs and then what the outputs are? Could just be maybe helpful.
In
high level, of course, but
yeah. In LCA, we talk about foreground and background systems.
Okay.
The foreground system for, let's say a dairy LCA, the foreground system would be the dairy itself, right? So the animal husbandry, the crop production, milk production, milk management, right? That would be the foreground. And so all of the information that you need to collect about the foreground system would be things like the herd demographics, how many of which type animal. Then what does each of those animals consume? How much manure do they produce? How is the manure managed? And what are the emissions associated with a particular manure management system? What is the feed conversion, right, for the lactating animals? How many pregnancies? How many mortalities, right? So you can imagine
a lot of data from the farm.
A lot of data from the farm. And then you also have to answer the question, how was the crop produced? Where did the fertilizer come from?
Okay.
Right? And which fertilizer was it? How much was used? And it goes all the way back in an LCA to, let's say that there's a refrigeration unit in the milking parlor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the LCA will go all the way back to the extraction of the coal or the natural gas, transportation to the electric power station, right, where it's burned and turned into electrons that then go through the line, and you keep track of the line losses, right, until it gets to the refrigeration unit, and then whatever, efficiency is there and all of that stuff to cool the milk from the body temperature to the transportation temperature. And then, right, that's the, I don't know if I should say scope 3 yet, but
Yeah.
So those emissions get counted. And then if we're interested in a full life cycle, right, we would say, okay, then it goes into a truck and it's transported to a processor where it's pasteurized and, renormalized and everything else.
So it's essentially anything that is required to produce whatever that product is from that farm all the way back.
All the way back, yeah.
And then do you go all the way to the consumer on the other end?
So in LCA, we talk about cradle to gate.
Okay.
Right? Or cradle to grave.
Okay.
And so the cradle to gate could stop anywhere along that process, right? So if we were interested in milk that made it to a retail store, for example, we could stop there.
That could be potentially the end. And then if a grocery store wanted to do an LCA on products, they would start there, potentially.
Or...
I'm asking really complicated questions.
No, not quite. They wouldn't start there, or unless starting there means that they would include everything that happened up until there, and then they'd look at everything that happened after.
Okay.
Which gets us to the cradle.
I shouldn't have.
Grave.
Yeah, let's go back to what you were talking. I shouldn't have mentioned the grocery store yet. You go ahead.
It's fine. Yeah, so the cradle to gate can stop anywhere along the way. The cradle to grave would go all the way through to the consumer, would include, food loss and food waste at the consumption level. It would even include an accounting of at the pasteurization plant, the loss of milk because the proteins stick on the inside of the pipes, and every day they rinse it. They rinse it out with an acid wash to clean the pipes for food safety purposes. But there's a little bit of milk loss, right? So we try to account even for that level of milk loss. And then little Johnny might not drink all of the milk in his cereal, and so what happens
going back to those strong bones. I'm just saying,
you should be drinking that milk, But anyway.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah, and very complex.
I know he's like, it's so simple.
We could spend. I'm curious. Like the first one was about cotton, and I was just thinking here, what else are the waste and thing, but that's not going into that. But so then you became, I would say, an expert in LCA. You started 16 years ago. I think we were talking about that yesterday, and then you built your, I don't know if it was the second half of your career or something like that, based on LCA. And you joined AgNext when, about a year and a half, 2 years ago?
Year and a half.
Why you took that path?
When my daughter was looking for colleges, right? You do the college shopping thing. And we came to CE Boulder. And my son was in 9th grade at the time, right? Or maybe 10th, I don't remember. Very quiet boy. And so we did all of this stuff, right, around seeing the sites and talking to people. And we were at one of the Indian restaurants for dinner, and there were, 8 or 10 people there. He never says stuff in public.
Oh, really?
And he speaks up sort of loudly.
Oh.
He turns and looks at me, and he said, "Hey, Dad, why exactly is it that we don't live here?"
Oh, wow. Okay, so there's been a push to come to Colorado for a while.
For some time, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful place to live for sure.
It is. And anyway, so it took a decade, but we got here.
But you made it. You made it. Well, and it makes sense, right? This position with CSU and your experience is a perfect dovetail, I think.
And that's the other thing is that I had a good program at Arkansas. I was and good working colleagues. The difference is that it was sort of ad hoc a bit at Arkansas.
Okay.
And here at AgNext, it's a very intentional focus on sustainable livestock production. And that was very appealing to me to become part of that and to have the colleagues, right, who are doing the experimental work, right, that can support the modeling and life cycle impact assessments. Because, right, the adage is true, right, garbage in, garbage out. So having high quality, verified experimental studies that support the life cycle work is really, I don't know if it's completely unique to AgNext, but it's it's uncommon. Yeah, and it's not something that was available at Arkansas. And so having the opportunity to participate in, really a kind of a breakthrough organization, right, was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I think you're going to ask the projects that Greg has been involved. We missed a very important question.
Oh, yeah. Back up. That's fine with me.
There's
a lot of questions.
Every podcast, we all like to ask, what is your definition of sustainability?
Oh, yeah. I missed that one.
If you have
one.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned, like, working with sustainability in ag is one of the things that...
Yeah. So I really almost always fall back to the Brundtland Commission definition from 1987, which I won't be able to provide a precise quote of that definition. But the simple definition is that sustainability means providing for ourselves while ensuring that our children and great grandchildren are also able to provide for themselves with the same level of ease, right? And so, so that's it in a nutshell, right? Obviously, there's a whole lot of
Of course.
Of unpacking that you can do around that in terms of sort of more detailed assessment of what that constitutes. One other sort of analogous is the company Seventh Generation, right?
I feel like I've heard of it. Is it like, I don't know.
The principle is simple, right? We think about the consequences of our actions through the next 7 generations. It's an American Indian
I see. Okay. Yep.
paradigm, right? So
Yeah,
so the American Indians had sustainability sort of baked into their fundamental culture, right? If you're thinking always about how your actions today might affect the 7th generation, right? That's kind of what sustainability should be. That is such a broad definition, however, right, that it may not be actionable in all cases, right? So if a farmer is trying to decide, right, should I put in an anaerobic digester on my dairy or not, right? That's a question of sustainability,
Right.
But that 7th generation idea is a nice guiding principle, but it doesn't help you with the day-to-day decisions.
Yeah, like the breaking it down and what does it mean in practice, and
That's
it. That's a great definition.
Yeah, I like that.
That's awesome. So we've talked a little bit about all of the projects that you've been working on here at AgNext and how involved you are with lifecycle assessment. But I'm kind of curious if you can tell our listeners and, enlighten us a little too on why is it so important to, conduct LCAs and how does that fold into sustainability in the bigger, broader sense?
That's a really great question, JR. Thanks. So the short answer is that we manage what we measure.
Yes.
And lifecycle assessment is a framework for quantifying, right? So measuring the things we call sustainable characteristics of production systems. So most of my work has focused on the environmental pillar of sustainability. And 2 reasons for that. One, social life cycle assessment is a still fairly early development, right? The kinds of data that are available to support social life cycle assessment are not always specific to an operation, for example. Is the amount of health care and health insurance.
I was going to say,
right?
I feel like some cities focus specifically on, infant mortality rates or something like that, right? In the social kind of category.
Right.
I think when you put the social, there are more things involved than numbers. I don't know.
And right. And so that's one of the challenges with social life cycle assessment, which is a field, right? So there are people that are doing it. And so we're trying to put those quantitative numbers on it. But you're right. At the end, there's a lot of difficult to quantify things. And so that makes that part of it difficult. So I haven't been very involved in the social life cycle assessment. The economics, most of the economics, right, in terms of the sustainability pillar of economics, also has fallen outside of my area because, right, the businesses are in the business of, right, their own economic structure and understanding, and right, so we can do. There's a thing called life cycle costing, right, which is a way to incorporate economic factors into an LCA, and the mathematics is identical, right? So it merges, but my research group has sort of steered away from that, mostly because getting data, right, on the economics of production from, to get data from a milk processor on all the details necessary to do a full economic analysis, it's difficult for them to share that, right? Because it's very business sensitive.
Oh,
It makes sense, right? And the same with the livestock sector, right? There's a lot of economic data that's just difficult to get, right? Because it's very sensitive. And so my focus has been on the environmental pillar. And so to the question, how does it fit with sustainability, finally, right? The manage what you measure adage is important, relevant, because we can quantify carbon footprint, right? We can quantify energy footprint. We can quantify water footprint. We can even go a bit further with water, for example, and say, what we know that consumption of water, 1 meter cubed of water in New Mexico is different than 1 meter cubed of water abstraction in Arkansas.
Sure.
Right? And so we can even get a little bit more granular about how do our activities affect in a more local or regional space, right? So being able to map out the baseline, right? Where are we today? What's the benchmark? How are we performing today in these carbon and water footprint metrics? Enables us to imagine interventions that will reduce those impacts, and then to test in the future, right? Did those interventions reach the target that we had hoped, right? And so we see a lot of companies saying they going to reduce carbon emissions by X percent in X years, right? And so the LCA is a tool, right, that can help them assess their progress. And can be used perhaps as a what if, right? What if we implement this technology?
Or remove the technology or do
exactly. Yeah. What if we change the system? What is the likely outcome? And so you can do some projections of, right? What are the potential pathways? And so that's the way that LCA fits into the sustainability narrative. Going back to you asked me the definition, right? And we said, well, this big, broad definition. So LCA is part of the toolkit, right, that can take us to narrower and narrower decision support, right? Do I put in that anaerobic digester, right? What will be the benefit in these things? Again, it doesn't look down 7 generations necessarily.
Sure.
But it gives us some way of quantifying what the costs and benefits to the environment will be. And broadly, right, we know that maintaining environmental quality is foundational, has to be foundational to sustainability, right? Another thing, right? Sustainability is not something that's really mysterious, right? We know, right?
Tell us more about what you mean by that. It's not mysterious.
It's not mysterious. We know that dumping plastic into the ocean is not sustainable.
That's
right?
not, yeah. Okay.
We don't have to measure it and quantify it. We know just
generally bad.
Generally
not
do
a good
that,
idea.
right? It's not a good idea, right? We know that putting toxins in the water is not a good idea, right?
Sure.
These are not. We know that maintaining soil health is a good idea.
It's optimal,
right?
Yep.
But the LCA lets us quantify those things, right?
Okay.
So sustainability is not mysterious. We know a lot of really important and good things to do, right?
And once you can quantify, it probably helps passing this message to the people that has to get the message.
Well, it goes back to what you're saying. You manage what you measure. So if you're not measuring it, then you're never quantifying it, and you can't even begin to think about how to make some shifts that would have, social, economic, or environmental impacts in your operation.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. Awesome. Any more professional questions?
No, I think we're ready to go on to the career one.
Yeah, now we're
going to ask you some fun ones.
more personal questions and life questions. It's pretty cool, Greg. It's been really fascinating to me. Listen, a lot of things I was taking notes in, and I always. It's one of my favorite questions, actually, and
it's a good one.
And we talk about your previous experience as an intern, like living in different countries, and how that built your. I'm assuming it built your career today and previous experience. So I always love this question: is if you could go back 10 years ago, what is something that you know today that you wish you knew 10 years ago that you could go back and tell a little younger Greg? Or maybe what is something that you know today that you wish you knew when you were finishing school, for example, or starting your professional career?
So I'll start with that one.
Okay.
I wish I had known the importance of networking.
Oh, okay. How come?
Because I was not very good at it. And looking back, I could have been more successful more quickly if I had built a better, stronger, more robust network of colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
I had the, I had the misconception that I could do it all.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, I think, a really important.
See collaborations or.
Yeah. I came across, I can't recall now where, some young woman was doing it was on a podcast somewhere, and she had the only thing I recall from the podcast was she had attended a workshop in Finland maybe, and the title of the workshop was "Collaboration is the New Competition."
Oh, interesting.
I thought so. I thought, wow, okay.
Excuse me.
That is, yeah. So anyway, it piqued my interest, and it's sort of to your point of building a network, right? And finding collaborators, and finding and one other thing I guess that's important is make sure you get good collaborators.
not only finding collaborators.
And if you bump into somebody who turns out to not be a good collaborator, don't collaborate, right? I mean, somebody's feelings may be hurt for a little bit, but if it's not a good fit, then it's
usually harder to try to make it work than it is to just say, hey, we did this project and then kind of move on.
Yeah. No, I agree. Awesome. Good.
Greg, I'm curious to know from you, beyond the dean's secretary who kind of pushed you into making a decision, she was influential in your life, but I wouldn't describe her as a mentor per se. I'm curious to know, how has mentorship influenced your career, and then how do you also, provide that for young folks that are in the field? Maybe not young folks, but just professionals in general. I guess I was thinking of younger scholars and students that are kind of on the beginning side of their careers.
So I never had any formal mentors. But as a early in my academic career, I was fortunate enough to be part of a consortium of researchers, and this was in the oil and gas remediation. Oil and gas remediation of oil and gas spills, right, or oil and gas exploration and production accidents. And so I had a number of sort of senior colleagues that were had set it up and brought me in. And I learned quite a bit about how to think about research problems and how to sort of manage complex field studies. And I guess then another key mentor would be one of my doctoral advisors. I had 3. One official and 2 ad hoc, and one of them was a modeler, and he was very sort of influential in helping me think about how to construct models and what models are and how they fit into the scheme of science. So that the Cliff's Notes is that in my worldview, models are hypotheses, right, and then experimental work is the observation, and we might have a simple hypothesis. If I let go of these glasses, they'll fall, right? That's an easy one to test. Yeah. Or we might have a really complex hypothesis, like what if we do this in the genetics of the beef on dairy, right?
Or what if we add this, feed additive for methane reduction in this system, right? There's all these more complicated questions than that. Yeah,
exactly.
That makes sense.
So thinking about modeling, right? And how do you manage that. And so that was an important mentoring experience for me. So my mentoring has been also mostly, not entirely, but mostly sort of ad hoc in the same way.
Okay.
Except for one person I'm on. They have at Tufts University, they have an official, formal mentoring program for their new faculty.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This one assistant professor said, "Hey, would you be on my mentoring committee?" And so that's the only one that I have sort of a really
like a more formal kind of.
Yeah.
And so we meet, between 1 and 2 times a year, and she'll share her resume and what her current projects are, and we'll give her feedback on, you probably ought to drop those 5 things.
And that's for sure something that he has done interactively with me and other probably young folks. Like I remember.
Well, I was going to say, with all of the AgNext faculty, I've seen it happen in meetings where he's like, "Are you really going to do that?" Like, but not in that way. But it's just like, given your the
focus
organization of your position and like what you're focused on, is this the best use of your energy and your time? Is kind of how you ask that question. And so I see it happening. I don't know if I think it's maybe just something that you do, and so it just naturally comes. But I do see you mentoring the AgNext faculty as well.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's because I have strong opinions.
And we like those opinions too, Greg.
and a lot of experience that we'll listen.
And,
Yes.
so you asked me how was the question worded?
Which one?
What is something I know today that I wish
the 10 years ago question. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, the easy answer to that is I wish I knew everything 10 years ago that I know today.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be great.
That would be way easier.
Yeah. But I didn't. So, a specific example, right, of what I know today and what I didn't know when I started my LCA work.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started the LCA work, it was with the dairy sector.
Mm-hmm.
And so we sent out surveys. We got 500 surveys. The surveys took between 6 hours and 6 days.
Oh, wow.
For the respondents to complete. Wow. So, and it was like 25 pages of super detailed information.
Mm-hmm.
So we asked the question, how many calves are born each year?
Mm-hmm.
Which was the wrong question to ask.
I was like, I don't know. How would you even begin to answer that?
Anyway, and I was interested, of course, in what the manure emissions were for the herd.
Yeah.
And so I'm not kidding. I spent 6 weeks, maybe not 40 hours a week, but I spent 6 weeks of pretty significant effort trying to figure out, from the way the question was asked,
mm-hmm.
the rolling herd average number of calves, which is a different thing.
That's a different answer.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Right? You kind of remove a little bit that depends year by year and
mm-hmm.
that fluctuation. And
right. And so I spent a long time trying to reconstruct herd dynamics,
mm-hmm.
right? And for the purpose of trying to answer the question, how much manure does a calf contribute to the farm? And at the end, I found that the calves, I made some progress on this calculation. I found at the end that the calves contribute 0.01%.
Okay.
And so I could have just ignored the calves from the outset. And today, knowing that I wasted 6 weeks
mm-hmm.
of time and effort on a project, on an inconsequential piece of it,
mm-hmm.
is really valuable, right? So now
Yes.
I'm much...
Is that going back to that failure thing we were talking about earlier?
Oh, yeah. Full circle.
Full circle.
Yeah.
You can learn a lot, though, from that kind of stuff. It's true.
And
Important.
and it's great to pass that message, because a lot of times
mm-hmm.
we fail, we get disappointed, and it's natural,
mm-hmm.
but it's understanding how you're going to overcome that and build upon that. I think that's pretty important.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're cruising. Okay. We're getting ready to close. We're wrapping up here, but we have a couple more questions for you, Greg.
Yeah. So, Greg, let's move on some wrap-up questions. And the first one is, you mentioned your 3 months biking, your plan to bike over the summer and everything. Can you just tell us a little bit about your passion about biking?
So, biking is sort of my moment of Zen sometimes, right? Because
full circle back to the Buddhist monk stuff. Saying.
So when I ride alone, right, you can sort of really focus on just moving. And when you ride with a group, right, you get really kind of close packed, and you have to have a really intense focus on just what you're doing, right?
Just biking.
Just biking, and just not crossing the wheel in front of you, and staying close and in the slipstream or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And managing the peloton. So it's just very it's just a way to not think about anything except this is what I'm doing.
This is what I'm doing right now, right here, very in the moment.
If I mess it up, I fail.
I mean, that's true.
Yeah. So it does carry some risk. So I always wear my brain bucket.
Oh, brain bucket. That's good. Yeah, those are helpful. That's awesome. Perfect.
So I do like to ride. And I've recently gotten a gravel bike, so I'm going to sort of explore a bit of gravel riding in addition to the road riding that I've been doing. And
get that brain bucket ready.
Keep it handy.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Greg, thanks so much for being on the AgNext podcast today.
Yeah,
it's been awesome to have you as a guest, and I've learned a lot about your career, and I'm sure Pedro has too.
Yeah. May I just ask a few last questions?
Yeah. Go for it.
And that's probably going to be quick. We hope so. What is a good book that you have read recently?
It's embarrassing.
No.
What is it?
I haven't read a book in 20 years.
Okay.
I read scientific literature.
Well, but you've been doing that, right? You're like, I just decided to read about quantum physics,
Well, that was 40 years ago.
Sure, but that was like at the time that was your for fun reading.
All right. So I guess I had the most recent book that I really enjoyed, actually several, Malcolm Gladwell's books on, I forget the title of it right now. I have one that I haven't read called The Information. There's another one. I can't remember the name of the book.
That's okay.
But it's about the experts, right? Fascinating book. The
fiction, nonfiction?
No, nonfiction.
Nonfiction. Okay.
And then the other two books were The World is Flat. Thomas Friedman wrote that. And one of Thomas Friedman's other books was really interesting. There's a few books that I'd like to read, but I don't remember the titles off the top of my head. Sorry.
That's okay.
We
no
can
problem.
cut that part too.
And
no worries.
Before you wrap up, Jared,
go ahead.
What is your favorite place to visit in the world, and what is your favorite food?
Yeah, those two. Those are usually what we asked.
Favorite food. Favorite food. My wife's chana masala.
Ooh.
Second favorite food is chicken tikka masala.
Okay.
Next is vegetable biryani. And then red curry from Thailand.
I see a theme here.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
That's amazing.
That's also your favorite place?
Yeah,
favorite
place you've been to.
Place to visit. There's nothing easy about that question.
Well, you've been to a lot of places.
I've been to a lot of places.
You travel a lot.
So probably Nepal. Right? Probably Nepal. I'm on the board of directors of a nonprofit that funds young children to attend English language school in Nepal. And so every 2 or 3 years, right, some of the board will go to Nepal to visit the schools and meet the children and their families, and that's always a great trip. And besides, right, there's big mountains there that.
I was going to say you went to Everest Base Camp once too, right?
I didn't make it to base camp.
You were on your way though.
I got COVID. I turned around.
Shoot!
Really?
Yeah.
But you were on the trek, right?
I was on the trek.
Do you plan to go back? Do you want to try to do it again? You think?
Yeah.
Try to make it COVID free.
Try to do it COVID free. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Good.
Good on my
Okay,
side.
great. Yeah, no problem. So awesome. Well, Greg, thanks so much for being with us today on the podcast. We've learned a ton about your career, and I've learned a lot about LCA.
Me too.
Yeah, it's been awesome. So thanks so much. And for our listeners that have joined us for the AgNext podcast, thanks for tuning in. We always appreciate that. If you would also like to follow along on social media, we are on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Something exciting coming up from the podcast is that we're actually going to ask you, our listeners, what would you like to hear from our faculty? And so keep an eye out for those polls on social media, and we'll provide you with really good content coming forward. If you have any suggestions or comments about the podcast, we would love to hear from you. Feel free to email us at agnext.colostate.edu, and we'll get you an answer as soon as we can. So thanks again for tuning in to the AgNext podcast, where we're always excited to tell you about what's next from AgNext.